Hello and welcome to the penultimate session of our 12-part writing programme, Line by Line. My name is Sarah Hull and I'm the Creative Director for Writer's Essentials. The last few sessions have covered the different stages of editing, starting with taking a step back and working out exactly what you're writing, who for and what it promises. Then going on to breaking your manuscript down into chapters and scenes in order to assess and improve the structure, plot and characters. And finally working on the writing style and choosing the best words for your narrator and characters. Once all these aspects have been worked out and strengthened, you will then go on to a line-by-line edit. That means going through your entire novel line by line and word by word and making sure you've chosen just the right words in the right order for the right effect. For this, I'm going to be looking at three things: the general principles of good writing, the job of each word, and how to pick out and edit the weak points. Firstly, the general principles of good writing. When editing your writing, you need to make sure that the words you use are appropriate, specific, and effective. Number one, appropriate. This is so that the words you use fit the context of your novel, the time and place, the narrative style, and the character's background, level of education, and personality. As we looked at last time, this is where the established vocabulary is really important, because the words you use will reveal details about the characters and the world they inhabit, so they need to fit with those things. Otherwise, the words will jar as being unrealistic and it will be much harder to establish the characters and the setting. Number two, specific. This is so that the words don't just fit, they're carefully crafted for the exact moment they're used. This is really difficult, but as much as possible, finding a unique way of saying something makes for far more interesting writing. And this will come from having a well-developed voice, setting, set of characters and story, which is what makes your novel unique. And then, based on the combination of all these things, you will need to choose the specific words that fit that part of the story or that character at that moment with that agenda. And this will help you to avoid cliches, tired, flat expressions and unimaginative dialogue. Number three, effective. This is so that the words you use achieve the desired effect. This will of course depend on what effect you're going for. What is the particular purpose of that word, sentence or paragraph, and whether or not you've been able to find the right words. And this is really important because weak, ineffective writing won't only fail to do the job properly, it will actually detract from the rest of the novel and even sabotage what you're trying to do, which is to keep your reader reading. If a thriller isn't thrilling or a comedy isn't funny, because the writing has failed to achieve this effect, your reader is likely to get bored or even give up reading, because the book isn't delivering what it promised. Secondly, the job of each word. Just as we looked at how each chapter and scene contributes to the overall novel, i.e. why it's necessary, when you come to doing a line-by-line edit, you'll need to think in terms of how each word contributes to the overall story. So what is it there to do, and does it achieve that task or job? This is a massive topic, so I'm going to pick out 4 tasks performed by words in a story, and these are revealing information, implying information, building a visual, and prompting a reaction. Number 1, revealing information. As the story progresses, new information will be revealed to the reader. And the simplest way of doing this is for the narrator to tell the reader that information in a straightforward sentence. This, of course, is known as telling, and there will always need to be some of this in a novel so that the reader can follow what's going on. So, for example, man arrived in room and fell over. This doesn't reveal enough information, so more words need to be added. Roger walked into the pub in order to buy a drink, lowered himself towards the nearest empty chair, missed and fell onto the floor. This tells us who the man is, what room he's walked into, and for what purpose, and the man's actions that cause him to fall on the floor. But you also need to think about what each word reveals and whether or not it's necessary. So what job does each word do? Roger, walked and pub reveal the man's name, how he arrived and where. Lowered and chair tell us his next movement and what he's aiming for. Missed, fell and floor reveal what happens next and where he ends up. And words like into, the, himself, towards, and onto are needed for the sentence to make sense. So this makes: Roger walked into the pub, lowered himself towards the chair, missed and fell onto the floor. This includes enough information for the reader to follow what's going on. The phrases "in order to buy a drink" and "nearest empty chair" are added details, but are they necessary? For this, you need to look at what is implied by the words, as well as directly told to the reader. If Roger has walked into a pub, you can assume he's there to buy some sort of drink. So the reader doesn't need to be told he was there in order to buy a drink. You would also assume that the chair was empty if he tries to sit in it, so the word empty isn't needed either. Although it does perhaps help the reader visualise the scene because they picture the empty chair before Roger sits in it. But nearest implies something else. It suggests he isn't picky about where he sits, or he is unable or unwilling to walk any further than the nearest chair. Beyond that, it implies he is perhaps too inebriated to walk further than the nearest chair, which is also implied by his failure to achieve the task of sitting in it. And so this one word, nearest, reveals more than just the position of the chair. It implies other things about Roger, his current condition and his motivation. So the sentence doesn't need to say, Roger walked into the pub in order to buy a drink, lowered himself towards the nearest empty chair because he was too drunk to be picky or walk to one further away, missed and fell onto the floor. You can just make it. Roger walked into the pub, lowered himself towards the nearest empty chair, missed and fell onto the floor. And the reader will pick up on what is implied and enjoy inferring these things for themselves rather than having them explained. Try and edit your work so that you only tell the reader what they need to know at that moment in the story, and avoid telling them too much or explaining things that are already implied, or your reader is likely to feel bored and patronised. Number 2, revealing information. As well as being aware what is implied and therefore doesn't need to be told or explained to the reader, it's good to actively look for ways to imply information rather than directly revealing everything. So firstly, look for ways to change your words so that they imply additional information. Rather than saying, Roger walked into the pub, you could have, Roger staggered, lurched or stumbled into the pub. All of these verbs perform the task of telling the reader Roger has entered the room, but they also describe the manner in which he's done so, which then implies how he's feeling, not great, meaning that one word does 3 jobs rather than just one. Choosing words that imply additional information will also create mysteries, which cause your reader to create a question in their mind, and that encourages them to read on in order to find out the answer. This is particularly useful for holding back plot points or details about a character. For example, Arthur ripped up the invitation and stuffed it into the bin, pushing it as far down as the crumpled cigarette packets and unopened bills would allow. This tells the reader some things, implies other things, and still holds some information back. Ripped and stuffed implies Arthur is angry. Invitation tells us what he's ripping up, but not what kind of invitation it is. For a wedding perhaps, or a birthday. Pushing it as far down as he can suggests he doesn't even want to see it. The crumpled cigarette packets reveal he smokes, probably quite a lot. And the unopened bills suggest he's refusing to pay or even looking at his bills. And so the words do more than just tell the reader what the character is doing. They reveal details about him and his life, and also leave a lot unexplained, creating mysteries surrounding this character. These mysteries, which lead to questions, will also create tension and intrigue, which is essential for keeping a reader interested for an entire novel. And when the question in the reader's mind is answered by the revealing of the mystery, the reader is rewarded with a really satisfying aha moment. So later on, we might get to find out what the invitation was for, why it made Arthur so angry, and whether or not it's connected with why he isn't opening his bills. Number 3, building a visual. Choosing your words carefully will also help you to build a strong visual in the mind of your reader and enable you to show instead of telling everything. So take another look at that sentence. The reader is told that Arthur rips up his invitation and pushes it into the bin, and that the bin is also full of cigarette packets and unopened bills. But it's the use of words and the addition of details which help the reader visualise the scene, picturing it in their mind. Strong verbs like ripped and stuffed enable the reader to picture the character's movements better, which means they don't have to be told Arthur was angry, because it's shown by his actions. And it isn't explained the invitation wouldn't go down very far because there were lots of cigarette packets and unopened bills in the way. Instead, the reader imagines him struggling to push the invitations down with all the cigarette packets and unopened bills. And they immediately picture there being lots of them because Arthur is having to push, to exert energy in trying to force the invitation out of sight. These are very subtle changes and they can be quite difficult to do, but allowing the movements of your characters and the details of their surroundings to show the reader how your characters are thinking or feeling, or to reveal details about them and their lives, and allowing the reader to observe the characters in their surroundings and to work things out for themselves will make the scenes, and therefore the overall novel, much more immersive and interesting to read. Number 4, prompting reaction. As I've talked about before, your reader will go on an emotional journey while reading your novel, and it will generally coincide with the emotional journey of the character or characters with whom your reader sympathises. Usually this will be your protagonist and other goodies, but a reader will sometimes sympathise with the antagonist or other baddies if encouraged to do so. If your plot, setting and characters have been done well, your reader will already be on board and caring about the characters and what happens to them, but you also need to make the most of the words you use. So as well as thinking about the visual you create and what the words imply as well as directly reveal, you need to think about what atmosphere each scene has, and this will be hugely affected by the tone. So take a look at this sentence. The room was empty except for a wooden table, with 2 vacant chairs, 2 place settings and a burnt-out candle. And then this one. The room was lit by a single candle, on a polished oak table, set for dinner for 2. In the first sentence, the writer starts by describing the room as empty and goes on to pick out the 2 vacant chairs, 2 place settings and the burnt-out candle, which implies something is wrong because the focus is on the absence of what should be there. Whereas the second sentence has a more optimistic tone, a hint of expectation, because the writer goes straight to the candle, a source of light, and mentions that the table has been polished and set for dinner, suggesting it's recently been prepared and that dinner is on its way. The words themselves, however, are more or less the same. The first sentence mentions that the room is empty except for the wooden table, the 2 empty chairs, the 2 place settings and the candle. Whereas the second sentence doesn't say there's anything else in the room, but it just lists the things that are there. The other significant difference is that the candle in the first sentence is burnt out, and it is still lit in the second sentence. And yet these minor differences give each sentence a different tone, and therefore a different atmosphere. This is how writing works, in levels. On one level, words reveal information. On another, they imply additional information or create tension by leaving gaps. And the words will build up the scene in the reader's mind, so they don't just picture the scene, the room, the characters and how they interact with each other and their surroundings. They will actually immerse themselves in that place and imagine what it feels like to be there at that moment. And when you have your reader immersed in your novel on that level, everything that happens in the story will have more impact, and the words you choose are likely to be more effective. Third and finally, how to pick out and edit the weak bits. I can't teach you to have a critical eye on your own work. That is something you will have to cultivate for yourself. But doing the following will help. 1. Read, write and think. Read good writing, read books about writing, read widely, and then write lots. Try writing different things, write in different moods, write a diary, write poetry, and learn more about language and how it works, and then analyse what you're writing and reading and think about whether it's good or not, and how it could be improved. 2. Keep asking. Go through your novel line by line and word by word and keep asking yourself the question, does it work? Do the words you've chosen have the desired effect or not? And think about the different aspects of language, such as meaning, tone, sound and rhythm. If you've picked the right words for the right effect, your writing will be stronger. If not, it will be weaker, and so will the overall novel. By the way, reading out loud can really help with this because it makes you think about things such as sentence structure, sound and rhythm. 3. Don't be afraid of criticism. Writing, and particularly writing to be published, is really hard, so you will have to work on it. And you will need to be honest with yourself and to criticise your own work. And if you're able to get any constructive criticism from friends or colleagues or a professional editor, and especially if you manage to get any from an agent or publisher, take it on board and use it to improve your writing. And it doesn't help to reject criticism or to give up on a book because it needs work. Even established authors sometimes need to stamp and fume when they receive negative feedback before getting on with the rewrites. 4. Try different words. Possibly the best way to test how good your writing is to use other words and see if they work any better. So play with the words, change their order, cut out unnecessary ones, use one word rather than 3, and then swap them around to change the vocabulary or the tone or the sound and see if your sentences are more effective. If they are, great, you've edited them effectively. If not, go back to the originals or keep trying other words until you get the right ones. And when you do find the right words for the right effect, it's a really satisfying thing. And finally, 5, keep going. Having the skill, patience and humility to edit your work even when it's tedious and boring and frustrating is half the battle to becoming a good writer. In the next session, Submission and Beyond, our 12th and final class, I'll be looking at the submission process, what to expect and what comes afterwards. The video will be online in June, and in the meantime, check out our website www.writersessentials.com for details about the writing programme, our feedback services and other resources, and how to donate to the production of these videos. In the meantime, happy writing and editing.